Today on my session, we have a lovely team. I'm Ronlyn Dandy from the Technology Training Team, Tia Simmons, Kimberlyn Niarco, and Gina Tuzo. We're all from the Technology Training Team, and we have Stacy Montgomery from the Title I office. So we've all come together to make sure that you have this information. We're going to give you an overview of distance learning. We're also going to talk about establishing tone online and setting expectations, as well as building community and types of interactions that you can have online, which are synchronous and asynchronous. And we'll talk about assignment types, workflow and learning and evaluation of learning in an online environment. Okay, so let's go on and let's get started. As we get started, one big woosah, you all. One big woosah, because we know this is uncharted waters. We're doing something different, and we want to make sure that everybody is prepared. Know that it's not going to be super easy for everybody. And some people will flow right into this, but just know that we appreciate you being here, getting this understanding so you can help our students through this time and ensure that their learning is not disrupted. This session is going to be very heavy. All right, we're going to cover concepts, the theory, and the process of teaching at a distance. So we're not going to really go over a lot of tools. Those tools will be covered in your other sessions. But we're going to talk about how you're going to deliver the instruction. General guidance is what we're going to give to you as we're working on conveying information about teaching online. Also, you should refer to the teacher school staff distance learning guide that was emailed out and sent out by our CEO. That information has the requirements for what must be delivered. All right, so you want to make sure that you reference that or you take a look at that for your requirements. We're going to tell you about the theory and specific practice, but that has been approved by the curriculum area, and that's the one where you're going to look at, that's what you're going to look at for your requirements and what must be done. Also, we've created a document that you can use to make your own notes. I know some people like to, and I know me, if I see something and then I write it down, I understand it better, or I can hold on to the learning better. So there's a bit.ly here, the bit.ly/PGCPS distance teaching, bit.ly/PGCPS distance teaching. If you go to that link, and that link has been put in the chat window, just so you see it. And if you want to click on it, you can click on it there. What that document will do is it will allow you to make a copy of a document that we've created. It has all the talking points and information on it for each slide. So if you reference that document, you can have a note of what we have there, what we're talking about, and you can take notes. Again, this is going to also be posted on our resource site once these webinars are finished. We just want to make sure that you have access to the information. Again, a few housekeeping things. So all the sessions and presentations and resources are going to be located at this bit.ly PGCPS remote teaching site. Just know, so you're going to see this information here, and we'll also post resources there as well. All of the recommended tools will be covered during the other sessions. Again, we're not going to cover all of those cool tools that you hear people talking about. We're not going to cover Meet. We're not going to cover Google Classroom. None of those things we covered here. We're talking about the theory about teaching online. All right. So here we have some very helpful links that are here for you. That first one that I've been referencing, which is the PGCPS remote teaching link, that one has all of the resources for remote teaching. It also has the links where you join webinars, and you all know that because you're here, but it has the links to join webinars, and eventually it will have the links to the recorded sessions, all right? Again, don't look for the recorded sessions today because we're going through and we're getting the best recorded ones, and we're going to post them there so everybody will have access. This is our 7th delivery of this webinar. So know that we're working as quickly as we can to get a posting up there for you so you can go back to it and look at it. The second link, which is the link that I suggested that you can go on and take your notes, is the bit.ly at /PGCPS distance teaching. That link is the notes page. Remember, you're going to have to click on it, and make a copy. It should force you to make a copy. And it includes all of our talking points and a place for you to take notes. And finally, the teacher school staff distance learning guide. That is the official one delivered by the county. And that has all of your requirements for what you'll need to do listed. So reference that. Okay. With all of that said, let's go ahead and get into the meat of what we're doing today. We're talking about online learning. There are several names for it. People refer to it as distance learning, distance education, e-learning, all of that. It all is lumped into a type of instruction that you deliver when the student and the teacher are separated. The student and the teacher are separated by distance. And we all know about the distance. We're all social distancing. And learning is social. So we are helping you or working to help you be able to reach your students at a distance. So keep that in mind when we're talking about online learning. That's what it is. And just while we're going to that, you have to recognize the difference between face-to-face learning and online learning, or online communication and face-to-face communication. When you have face-to-face communication, you can easily look at somebody's facial expression and understand, oh, they don't understand what I'm talking about. Maybe I need to explain it a little better. And as a matter of fact, teachers have that awesome ability to be able to look at their students' faces and understand what's going on within them. You can still do that, but there's a different type of communication that you'll have to do in an online setting. You also have teacher proximity when you're face to face. You know, you can stand right next to Sally or Johnny and get them right back on track. But you're going to have to look at different roles and different ways to get them back on track when you're working at a distance. Also, you have group work and you have classroom dialogue when you're working at when you're right face to face with your students. So you have to think about that a little differently. With online communication, we have both synchronous and asynchronous communication. And we'll get a little into that, further into that when we move a little forward. Just keep that in mind. Synchronous being same time, asynchronous being at a different time. You also have chat sessions on online communication, group discussions and chats and messages, all of those occur. You can still do collaborative communication in your online learning, and we'll visit that as well. And we'll also talk about video conferencing. Remember that learning indeed is social, as I mentioned before. And because learning is social, in a virtual setting, you're going to have different types of interaction. You're going to have student to teacher interaction. You're going to have teacher to student interaction and student to student interaction. Now, some people get a little concerned. We think about student to student, but remember, your students are people too. And you know, in the classroom, they like to communicate with each other. And as a matter of fact, outside of the classroom, they like to communicate with each other. And with our high schoolers, you know, they're going to do that anyway. So you want to keep that in mind when you're creating and delivering assignments and instructions for your students. Another very important thing that you're going to have to do is use your online voice. All right. You know, we talk about being in the lunchroom and we talk about being outside and inside and having different voices. Well, you have an online voice. In many cases, in online learning, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. All right. So you want to think about in your communication to students, whether it's email or communication to parents, whether it's chat or email, You want to make sure you address everyone. You want to make sure you reveal your persona in such a way that, we may be required to be a little more vulnerable. We're all in this together, and it's good to communicate that to your students and to your parents. That kind of makes you communicate a little differently when you communicate with the parents and students that way. Also, you want to reach out to the lurker. Sometimes when you're creating lessons and doing things online, there are students and parents who may be just looking at what you're posting and not saying a thing, or not completing assignments. You want to make sure that you reach out to that lurker. That's that quiet person in the classroom that has that look on their face like, I don't know what's going on, but they don't say anything. Online, you can't see that. So we call that a lurker, and you might want to check on them. You can have a sense of humor in your communication with students and parents. But remember, sometimes communication and a sense of humor via text and message kind of gets missed sometimes. So you want to make sure that you're avoiding sarcasm because they may not understand that. Also, provide constructive feedback. Make sure you're providing constructive feedback to people that you're communicating, students, and parents. Consider how that feedback is given to your group and to individual students. And again, we're all in this together. Remember to be kind to your students, be kind to parents. We don't know their situation. We don't know who's helping the students with working online, if anybody's helping the students with work online, or if it's auntie or grandma that's helping with them, helping them communicate online. So just keep those things in mind. You want to make sure you establish tone in online instruction. You know, I know when I first started in the classroom, I got advice from others. On the first day of school, you set a tone. You don't smile the first day. Well, you draw your own inferences from that. You want to make sure that you set the tone because after all, you're still the teacher. So you're going to set the tone for communication with your students and with your parents. If you don't set the tone, what goes awry in the classroom can also go awry online. So you want to make sure you set the tone. Send an introductory email to parents and students. That's your first opportunity to set your tone with your parents and your students. Establish your rules for communication. You want to be also assertive in listing those rules and defining when the communication should take place. Be empathetic in your communication in that email. A schedule for work and for communication. If you don't establish that schedule, you're going to get emails and people are going to reach out to you at all times of the day, all times of the night. You want to make sure you establish that. You can do that. Encourage parent engagement in their student learning. And remember that it might not be a parent who's working with the student. I know sometimes with high school, they don't want parents, the high schoolers don't want parents involved, but it's really a good idea to reach out to the parents and include them in your communication. All right. Structure is very important to success in an online atmosphere. So make sure that you create that structure for your students and remind them that this is new territory. Not only are you doing something different, but the students are doing something different as well. Now, what does this tone look like at different levels? We talked about this because we've done sessions already with elementary and middle school. High school, again, they may have that different type of communication. They may not want their parents involved, but remember, you're the teacher. Let's go ahead and make sure that those parents are involved, at least have that introductory contact to ensure that they know what's going on. or that the guardian knows what's going on and knows what the expectations are. Know that when you set the tone, your high school students may want to jump out and they want to have their own conversations and do their own thing. Nip that in the bud by already setting up a place or a designated time where that may happen. That might be one of the ways that you set that tone for student to student communication in your online classroom if you're using Google Classroom. So make sure you consider that based on your students. You know your students. You've had them for over um, a half a year now. The year is almost at an end. So you know basically how to communicate with them. You just want to make those adjustments since you're communicating with them in a different arena. When you're creating that email to set your tone with the students and the parents, remember that you don't know what's going on in their household. I know we think about that now, but when you're in the throes of trying to make that first communication, we don't want you to forget it. There may be your students may be taking care of a younger sibling, or their parents may be essential employees and may be going off to work, and maybe someone in their household is sick. So make sure you address that, and first check on the welfare, and also acknowledge that we're all going through a tough time. When you're responding to parents with email or students with email, make sure that your emails are helpful. That means that they're providing clear guidance and giving their specific answer for what their need is. Be thoughtful. Is there anything that could be misunderstood? This is if there was any other time that we have to be really good at giving directions and explaining things, this is the time. So you want to make sure that you're very clear and that we don't forget to be assertive and provide support, because we are indeed in this together, and this is new for everyone. Um, Now, in just a few minutes, I want you to think about just a second. We're going to open up the chat area. But given that online learners flourish in an atmosphere where there's structure and trust, it again is important to begin your contact with parents and students in a way that exhibits both structure and trust. Now, I did mention a few things earlier, and I want to check for understanding like we do with our students, and that helps with adults as well. What are some of the items that you would include in your introductory email to students and parents? What are those things that you would include when you're writing that email? In just a moment, we're going to open up the chat session.
The chat is open at this time. I'm going to start the timer.
Someone mentioned if students don't respect the guidelines or communication rules. Well, you can say that to them once, remind them of that once, and then repeat your rules again. Very good. I saw somebody mention policy. Don't forget, you can always remind students about the code of conduct that still is in effect.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the chat at this time. I hope everyone has had an opportunity to go ahead and enter their feedback and their questions.
One thing too, to make your presence be known. Make your presence be known online. A lot of times with students, I work with other students in the county taking online courses, and they forget there's a person on the other side of the computer. They're just not doing work and it's going into a black hole and a computer is checking it. Let your presence be known. And the way that you do that is to show announcements that are regularly posted with a welcome postings, and remind them that you're there. And there might be items that you list as a heads up from the teacher. You know how to communicate with your students. Get them in some way that is very catchy, that they're able to jump in, and you've piqued their interest, as some of you have already mentioned in your introductory email and activities. Address common questions when you're posting your regular announcements. You could give lots of praise. You can give positive feedback. You can even highlight stellar or improving students. Even if they're just improving in the mode that they're checking email, that they're responding in their email, or they're turning in assignments. Um, that goes a long way when you acknowledge students. And don't be surprised if you find that there are students who are quiet in your class, who are a lot more chatty in the online arena. And I don't mean chatty, definitely, I mean with other students, but with you. Because this provides a whole different world for those students. They can speak up and talk to you in an arena that doesn't really require them to stand out in the classroom. So that's one of the things that we see in online learning. You want to make sure that you make your comments broad at some points, where they're giving the comments are to the class. And then at some points, you're going to comment to specific individuals. Another thing to consider is making sure that you interact promptly with students. If you turn on your notifications, you can get a notification um, when a student responds to you, or a student gives you information or asks a question. Um, so you can do that, and that's a good way to make sure you provide quick responses to them. You also want to think about interjecting while students are having chats or communication. And you want to establish and keep consistent office hours. That's very important, making sure you set the tone for when you're going to work with them. So you're setting consistent office hours. All right, Gina, we're back on track. So we're going to go ahead and at this point, we're talking about setting expectations and planning. Remember, it's not about the student interacting with the computer. It's about the student interacting with you, the instructor, and the student interacting with the other students, as well as the content. All right, just think about it that way. When students come to your class in the good old days and they had a pen or a pencil, they didn't sit there and look at the pen and the pencil all day. All right, they're focusing on the content, they're focusing on getting the instruction from you, the teacher. They're focusing on working with their peers to complete specific tasks. So keep that in mind when you're delivering instruction. Think about the different variables. As I've mentioned, you don't know what's going on with their families until you reach out and talk to your students. And it might be a good idea to reach out to them individually and see how they're doing. I know at a high school level, when I taught high school, I had 150 students at one point. So it might not be um, a good thing to try to reach out to all of your students individually, but you can definitely send them a message here and there, just checking on them and making sure everything is all right. Because we know that grandparents may be helping them and they might be really frustrated with the technology. We've seen the news reports of parents having a hard time just with teaching their students under these circumstances. So just think all of those things, think about all of those things when you're planning for assignments and when you are planning your communication. You want to also think about building community and getting to know your students. Consider how you would do in your classroom if it took place virtually. How would you do this? And this is how you would do it. You could record video messages using video tools or more personal connections. You can post regular inviting announcements and check in with students again socially and emotionally, as I mentioned before. Schedule times for planned assignments and when those assignments must be done, and also give students opportunities to work together virtually. That's really going to be a good thing to do at the high school level. And what better way for them to get ready for the real world and making them college ready than to do some collaborative types of activities where they have to work with each other online. That's a wonderful opportunity to highlight some of those types of activities. And also maintain consistent communication during this time. that consistent communication is really, really important for building your community. Also important to building your community is to remind the students about digital citizenship. Um, Digital citizenship is very important. Just so you know, we will be using, or we have enabled, Go Guardian, and that's available to monitor students and what they're doing online as they're using district issued devices. And there are resources on our resource page on the PGCP remote learning page. So there are resources for Go Guardian on that page as well. Communicate, remember we spoke about this already, communicate clear rules about working online. Know about, remind the students that this is an arena where we are not going to be inappropriate with the students or with the teachers. You want to make sure that they're aware of that, and you can bring up the code of conduct again. This would not be a good time to curtail their internet usage or their email usage. So just, you can remind them of that. You don't want to come down really hard on them about that in the beginning unless you see it going that way with your students. Because we want to remember that these are different times for all of us. There are also, we want to make sure that our passwords are kept secure, ours and theirs. And think about getting permission for live participation online. Most of our students were required to sign a media release. We're not recording for the purposes of showing to the media, but you just kind of want to keep that in mind. There should not be a problem, and I think they're working on something on that. So make sure you keep checking the PGCPS remote teaching site for more information about that. We did get an email that something like that is about that or addressing that is coming up. Finally, consider using digital citizen resources such as the ones provided by Common Sense Media Digital Citizenship. And again, when you make a copy of this document, you will have that link, and all of the links should be active on the document as well. So going back to our different types of interactions in our online environment, there are synchronous interactions and asynchronous interactions. The synchronous ones are like dinner. We're having a plated meal together, or lunch, or breakfast, or anytime we're all at home eating at the same time. Those are synchronous interactions. Everybody has their meal together. Everybody sits down at the table at the same time. They partake together. That's when you're giving assignments, and everybody is required to be online and present at the same time, as opposed to synchronous interactions. No, that's synchronous interaction. Excuse me, sorry, asynchronous interaction, not at the same time. All right. That's when you have different options. You have options of doing the work um, differently at a different time. It's not required that all of our participants or your participants are online together. And just to further emphasize that, if it's synchronous, students attend at a scheduled time, and sometimes this is done through video or audio teleconference. You can even do um, a Google type of activity where they're all required to work on a document at the same time or provide feedback at the same time. The biggest thing to remember is at the same time. So other examples of synchronous interaction are your virtual meetings, your live stream lectures, and scheduled video conferencing. And don't forget your office hours. Office hours are going to require you to be there, and they're going to require the students to be there at the same time. Also, you have, actually office hours could be asynchronous, because if you're offering them to students at different times, they can jump on at different times, but you're providing it and they're having that conversation back and forth. So that back and forth has to be at the same time. That would make it synchronous. We also have asynchronous interaction. And that's when students access content and they ask questions and they practice assignments and do assignments, not at the same time. All right. So they're not all required to be there at the same time. This could be done through recorded lessons. If you record a lesson and then require students to respond, that is considered asynchronous interaction. Or posting to discussion boards or chats, that those again are asynchronous examples of asynchronous interaction. Um, and when you're thinking about the types of assignments that you're giving, all right, you want to make sure that you're keeping things simple. You want to use technology where it makes sense. For example, we've got images up here, and everybody hasn't heard this, but images up here of a Twinkie and a cupcake. Both the Twinkie and the cupcake have cake. Both the Twinkie and the cupcake have icing or filling. The Twinkie, if you break it apart and try to separate the cake from the icing, you're just going to have a big mess. If you're having the cupcake, you can remove the icing and just have the cupcake. If you're using technology, it should be used because it's a Twinkie situation. That means you can't do it without the technology. That means the technology is enabling you to have this type of assignment. But if you can separate the two, there's no need to try some big piece of technology that you've never used before or that is hard for you to manage. Remember, you want to think about you and you want to think about your students. You want to give them really good experiences, learning rich experiences, but you want to make sure that you're using the technology not for technology's sake, but because it's the best way to deliver that content. You're going to make sure you provide specific directions for each of your assignments. Be clear, be concise, have reasonable due dates. Because remember, you're going to grade this. All right. You want to make sure that you have reasonable due dates. You want to create projects and activities that allow for flexible choice. Remember, all of your students, as you know, don't learn the same way. So we want to make sure that we address that as well. And also consider how non-digital work or not high-tech work can be used for different situations. That means you could use photos and talk about photos. And in just a minute, I'll give you some examples of different types of activities as well. So you want to make sure you consider that when you're given those activities. And remember to use district resources and supplement with district tools. You may see a lot of things out there, but just because it's out there doesn't mean it's district resources or that they are district tools. But know that we've got a couple of ones that we suggest and a couple of ones that are out there that might be good for you to use. But think about your different types of assignments. Visual biographies, you could explain a process. You could do an introductory to vocabulary. Also, online research. You can do an assignment that has to do with choosing your own adventure or a if-then story or discussions. And remember, you see on the screen, there are several tools that we have talked about in the district and maybe mentioned in a lot of the trainings. You don't have to use all of these, but these are some that can be used. We have the Hangouts Meet, we have Pear Deck, we have Screencastify, we have YouTube, there's Adobe Spark, and Flipgrid is a good resource as well. And finally, Google Classroom. We all should be using Google Classroom to interact with our students. That is a really cool, and I'm going to mention this one thing about Google Classroom, and then we're going to move on because there is a piece in Google Classroom that you have the parents are listed there as well, and they can get regular summaries of what's going on in the Google Classroom. So this will help you manage communicating with them. They can see they get a regular posting, a regular summary. It doesn't give them something every time you post, but it gives them a summary. All right. With that being said, I think we're going to next open the chat up for just a moment so you can ask some questions. In just a moment, that chat area is going to open, and you can make sure that when it is open, you address your chat to everyone. There's a arrow there, and you have to choose everyone, or else everyone won't see it. And Gina, if we're okay with opening, you can go ahead and do that. Okay. As you're typing, I did see something come up about consent emails or consent from the district. Again, I mentioned earlier that they're working on something like that. Once it's ready, anything will be posted at that resource, remote teaching resource page. So think about your workflow and learning evaluation. You want to think about how you're going to do that. When you're giving assignments, think about how you're going to assign. Think about how you're going to collect and how you're going to evaluate. So our next item, again, when you're thinking about delivering your instruction and your workflow of your assignments, think about ensuring the assignments are rich and engaging, that they are good assignments, that are just not just busy work. I know, everybody's got a lot to do right now. We're up against different circumstances, but make sure that those assignments are rich and engaging. Make sure that just like when you're in the classroom, you identify the learning objective. Um, I know when I taught high school, it was okay, when am I ever going to need this? Why are we doing this? You want to make sure, just like in your classroom, you are stating those objectives and giving different types of assignments as well, not always the same thing. Establish clear due dates about concerning collecting your work. Um, Determine which feature and tool you're going to use to collect work. Google Classroom has awesome features where you give the assignment in Google and they turn it in Google, and you can grade it in Google, and then you can put the grade in there in Google. So just think about that. If you haven't attended that Google session, that's a must see. I believe they're also going to have Q&As for specific help as well. So check that out. Also provide clear directions for the students. Okay. We got to be clearer than clear when we're talking to the students online, because they may not have that immediate ability to ask a clarifying question. All right. Make sure that when you're thinking about evaluating work, consider our policies. And I'm sure there will be policies regarding grading during this time posted on our remote teaching site. And I know that there have been several items that have been added to that site as far as resources um, for grading and evaluating students. You're going to make sure you refer to the Division of Academics when you are talking about or thinking about grading. We can't give you that information, but Division of Academics is the go-to group for that information. Check with your content area supervisors as well, or your content people at school. Final thoughts. We're close to the end. We're in this together. You are able to do this. If you are a teacher, you can do anything. I know this. If you're a teacher, you can do anything. I came from a whole different background into teaching, and I know that the requirements that are put on teachers are great, and I know that the skills that teachers have are even more great and awesome. All right. Remember, your students are having the same experience. They're all fish out of water right now. They're all looking at things differently. So you want to remember that. Again, make sure you mute your microphone. Mute your microphone. Thank you. So make sure in your assignments, keep it simple. You're going to have to evaluate those assignments. Don't make it harder to evaluate it than it is for you to give the assignment. Keep it simple. Keep those assignments simple. And for more support and more information, we've got a ton of resources on the PGCPS remote teaching bit.ly. All right. Make sure you check out that information. Again, I'm going to repeat, there are some really helpful links that I want to share with you again. The PGCPS remote teaching bit.ly. That one has all the resources for everything we've talked about today. It has links to join webinars. It also has links for recordings. The recordings are going to be posted. They're not posted today. They'll probably be posted maybe tomorrow, and then or the day after. So hopefully we'll get them posted as soon as possible. Then we have the PGCPS distance teaching document. That's the one, that's the note page for this specific session. This is the one that you could take notes on. If we're not able to get to it, write the bit.ly down. You can get to it even when we're done to this webinar, and make a copy of it and write down any notes that you have. And finally, the teacher, school, staff distance learning guide. That is the one that's PGCPS issued. Excuse me, it gives specific district instructions and guidelines about teaching at a distance and what's required of teachers and every staff person in the county. And also, it has been added to our remote teaching site. So that information is there as well. Okay. So with that said, we got a couple of reminders, just a couple of reminders. All of the sessions and presentations and resources are going to be located at that remote teaching site. All of our resources, recordings, presentations are available or going to be available at the PGCPS remote teaching site. And all of the recommended tools, again, are going to be covered in those other sessions. If you haven't signed up for those specific sessions, please do. Also, revisit the Teaching at a Glance document for curricular directives and information. We can tell you about the process and what everybody should be doing, but those are the requirements. So make sure you stay up to date on those. Attendance will be taken from in my PPS for this session. We're going to collect information from the WebEx session, and attendance will be recorded in my PPS after that has been pulled down. So just be patient. As soon as that information is entered in my PPS, you'll get an email that says that you were marked attended and you have completed the training. So that will be coming. And I want to say thank you so much. I appreciate your patience as we're working on delivering training. I appreciate your patience and your willingness to work with us and to support our students who are learning this different way. Again, here's our contact information. I'm Ronlyn Dandy. We also have Kimberlyn Niarco on here, Tia Simmons and Gina Tuzo. We're all from the technology training team, and the ever so awesome Stacy Montgomery, who is from Title I. So just know that we appreciate you. You can do this. You can do all things.
Thank you so much for your time today.